Welcome to Cinema Bites, your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. The movie starts with a young man named Stan who has just woken up. As soon as he wakes up, he looks at a picture of his mom and dad and feels sad because they had recently passed away. After that, Stan gets ready to go to school. While he is getting ready, his grandfather comes and quarrels with him as usual, yelling at him for no reason and calling him a reckless person in the house. Stan gets very angry and tries to respond, but as soon as he does, his grandfather grabs him tightly by the neck and forbids him from responding again. His grandfather believes that since Stan lives in his house, he must listen to him and follow his orders without question. He even hints that he could kick Stan out of the house at any moment. Stan stays quiet and endures the treatment. Stan grabs his bag and walks to school. Upon arriving, he sees a group of bullies harassing a fellow student named Domer, who is Stan's close friend. They have grown up together and share a strong bond. Seeing Domer in trouble, Stan immediately steps in to defend him. A fight breaks out between Stan and the bullies until their teacher arrives, yells at them. Stan takes Domer away from the school, and they sit in a quiet place to chat. From their conversation, it becomes clear that this is not the first time such an incident has occurred. The bullies often harass them, making Domer feel powerless, and they have learned to live with this situation. The two friends continue talking and wasting time until Stan decides to head home to avoid being late. When Stan gets home, his grandfather starts quarreling with him again as usual. Stan goes to his room, sits alone, and looks at pictures of his parents, feeling sad. His grandfather calls him and asks him to take the dog outside to the garden for a while. To avoid trouble, Stan complies. He takes the dog to the garden, but as soon as they step outside, the dog starts barking aggressively in the direction of a shed. The shed belongs to Stan's grandfather and is used to store old junk. Stan checks the shed but finds nothing unusual. However, as he is about to leave, he notices blood on the ground. Suddenly, a mysterious figure appears behind him in the shed. Terrified, Stan runs out of the shed. Once he calms down, he assumes the person he saw might be a criminal or a homeless individual. He shouts for the person to leave the shed, but no one responds. Stan warns that he will let the dog deal with the intruder, but still, there is no response. Stan lets the dog into the shed, and soon after, loud noises and howling are heard. Suddenly, the sounds stop completely. Stan calls for the dog, but there is no answer. Moments later, the door to the shed opens, and the dog's severed head is thrown into the garden. Horrified, Stan runs back into the house. He tells his grandfather what happened, but his grandfather initially mocks him and doesn't believe him. However, when the dog doesn't return, his grandfather grows worried and goes outside to investigate. He sees the dog's severed head in the garden and is shocked. Determined to avenge the dog, his grandfather stands in front of the shed, shouting at the intruder inside and threatening to go in and deal with them. Stan tries to stop him, crying and begging him not to go in, but his grandfather ignores him and enters the shed. Stan waits outside, worried, until he suddenly hears his grandfather scream. Stan quickly opens the door to the shed and sees his grandfather falling to the ground, dying. Stan tries to pull him out, but the entity inside the shed is too strong and drags his grandfather back inside. Terrified, Stan realizes that whatever is inside the shed is not human. He quickly grabs the dog's chain, locks the door to the shed, and runs back into the house. He considers calling the police but changes his mind at the last moment. He remembers that he had previously been in a reformatory for fights and problems he caused at school and was released on parole. If he causes any more trouble, he could be sent back to prison. Stan is left in fear, unsure of what to do about the horrifying entity in the shed. He kept awake and worried until he loses hope and goes to sleep. During the day, Stan goes to school and stays alone, thinking about the problem he is in, until a student, his friend named Roxy, sees him and falls in love with him. Roxy starts to apologize to him for what she did to him before because they were in a relationship and she left him. She asks him to forgive her and give her a second chance as friends, and because Stan still loves her, he forgives her. They both prefer to chat together and reminisce about their memories together. Stan feels comfortable talking to her and wants to tell her about what is in the shed, hoping that she will help him and tell him what to do. But before he can tell her anything, his friend Domer Inio intervenes and interrupts, so Roxy asks permission from them and leaves. Of course, Stan gets upset because of Domer's behavior and leaves too. As soon as he leaves, Stan takes advantage of the fact that the bullies find Domer alone and they beat him up again. Then Stan returns home, still not knowing how to act regarding the disaster in the shed. He begins to encourage himself a little and approaches the shed door, hoping to hear something. But as soon as he approaches the door, the creature takes out its hand and tries to get rid of Stan. At the last moment, the creature's hand is burned by the sun's rays, and it leaves Stan. At that time, Stan miraculously survives. At the same time, Domer arrives at Stan's house, in a miserable and difficult condition after the bullies beat him. He comes to fight with Stan because he left him alone, but as soon as he arrives, he finds Stan looks terrified. Stan confides in Demir about the creature in the shed. Demir initially thinks Stan is hallucinating or under the influence of drugs. To verify, Demir approaches the shed, and as he gets closer, the creature tries to attack them but is unable to leave the shed because of the sunlight. This is when Stan and Demir realize that the creature's weakness is sunlight and that it may escape once night falls. After calming down, Demir suggests they use the creature to their advantage by luring the bullies to the shed and letting the creature deal with them. However, Stan vehemently refuses, saying it would be a crime and that he doesn't want to get into any more trouble that could send him back to prison. He also reminds Demir that he trusted him with this secret because he considers him his closest friend. Demir eventually promises not to betray Stan's trust and leaves. Stan watches TV before sleeping for a little while, and the series playing is about vampires. Stan realizes that the creature in the shed has the same characteristics as vampires. He concludes that the creature he imprisoned is a vulgar vampire. Stan tries to find a way to get rid of it and discovers that it can die in 3 ways. The first way is by exposing it to sunlight directly, the second way is by cutting off its head, and the third way is by stabbing it in the heart. Nothing else will affect it. At that moment, Stan decides that he will finish off the vampire. The next day, Stanley starts preparing to go to school, but before leaving, he is surprised by a detective from the police station coming to ask him some questions. The detective asks about a missing person named Joe, saying Joe was a man who lived nearby and had a normal life without any problems. One day, he noticed that the rabbits he raised were being killed continuously, so he thought a predator was responsible and decided to search for it in the forest himself. However, the problem is that he disappeared suddenly after entering the forest, and the police couldn't find any trace of him. The detective shows Stanley a picture of Joe, hoping he might recognize him. To Stanley's shock, the person in the picture is the vampire in the shed. Although he recognizes him immediately, he denies knowing or seeing him before, showing signs of fear and nervousness. This makes the detective suspicious, especially since Stanley has a criminal record. The detective offers to drive him to school, intending to talk to him further and figure out what he's hiding. Stanley reluctantly agrees, and they head off together. On the way, the detective pressures him with questions about his grandfather. Stanley tells her that his grandfather is always out of the house, and unfortunately, he doesn't know where he goes because he's always drunk when he leaves and never provides any information. The detective doesn't believe him and grows even more suspicious, deciding to investigate further. When Stan goes to school, Roxy comes to talk to him. While they are talking, one of the bullies named Marble comes and annoys Stan, belittling him and saying bad things about Roxy and her reputation. Stan loses his temper and attacks Marble like a madman, hitting him hysterically. A teacher intervenes and takes Stan away before he can finish him off. The teacher tells Stan that this is not the first time he has caused a problem at school. The teacher reports the incident to the police and asks them to send someone to bring Stan's grandfather to discuss his behavior and find a solution for him. As soon as Stan learns that someone from the department went to his house, he becomes afraid that the vampire will be released and no one will be able to stop it. Marble decides to go after them. Demir is standing there and sees everything that is happening from the beginning. At the same time, the detective who suspects Stan is the one who goes to his house to meet his grandfather. When the detective arrives there, she keeps knocking on the door and calling for Stan's grandfather, but no one answers her. So the detective becomes more suspicious of the matter and keeps searching around the house, hoping to find anything that makes her understand what is happening. As soon as she arrives at the shed, she hears a very loud knocking sound and someone asking for help and trying to get out. The detective thinks that Stan locked his grandfather inside the shed, so she quickly goes to open the shed and get him out. At that moment, Stan arrives and tries to stop her, telling her that there is a vampire inside the shed and she can't open it. But, of course, the detective doesn't believe him, points the gun at him, and forces him to lie down. The detective continues opening the door, and a vampire comes out of the shed and bites her. She tries to defend herself and shoot him, but he is stronger than her and separates her arm from her body, dragging the detective inside the shed. Luckily for Stan, the vampire can't get out to him because of the sun. At that moment, Marble arrives at Stanley's house, seeking revenge for what happened at school. Stanley tries to make him leave in any way possible, avoiding a fight. However, Marble takes advantage of this and starts beating Stanley relentlessly. Dumore arrives at the scene, grabs the detective's gun, and threatens Marble with it. Stanley steps in and tries to calm Dumore down, asking him to lower the weapon. But Dumore, acting like a madman, ignores Stanley and even threatens him. Marble becomes frightened and begs Dumore for mercy, promising to leave. But Dumore is determined to take revenge for all the bullying he endured over the years. He points the gun at Marble and tells him that if he wants to stay alive, he must enter the cabin in the garden and lock himself inside. Upon hearing this, Stanley tries to talk Dumore out of his plan, but Dumore doesn't listen. He forces Marble into the cabin, unaware of what awaits him inside. Marble enters the cabin and locks the door. Suddenly, screams are heard from inside. Stanley becomes furious with Dumore and attacks him, resulting in a fight between the two, leading to Domir hitting Stan with a gun on his head and felt consciousness. After a while, Stan and Bella find Roxy next to him, trying to help him. Stan quickly goes to see what happened after he lost consciousness. To his surprise, he finds the door of the shed open. So he takes a stick and goes to the shed. When he enters, he does not find the vampire there, but instead, he finds Demir inside after letting the vampire bite him, attempting to turn into a vampire as well. Demir shows Stan his newfound strength and tells him that no one can harass or bully him anymore. Demir then tries to attack Roxy and kill her, but Stan stands up to him. After a long battle, Stan exposes Demir to the sun's rays, defeating him. Stan then checks on Roxy to ensure she is okay. He tells her everything from the beginning, including about Joe, the vampire who was trapped in the shed. He explains that Joe is now free and will likely return after sunset to seek revenge. Stan decides he must go after Joe and kill him first. Roxy decides to join him and help. They prepare themselves and the house for Joe's arrival. As night falls, they arm themselves and wait. Suddenly, two of Marble's friends arrive, looking for him since he's been missing all day, and his phone is off. Stan comes out talking to them behind the door and tells them that Marble is not here and asks them to leave immediately because their lives are in danger. But they do not believe him because Marble's car is outside and they refuse to leave. Suddenly, Ju pulls one of them and kills him, so the other kept screaming and pleads him to enter the house, and indeed, Stan and Roxy open the door for him and enter and try to calm him down and make him control his nerves to help them in killing Ju. And while they are talking, they hear the sound of a knock on the floor above, so they decide to go up and confront it. And Stan gives a weapon to Marble's friend, whose name is Pitt, and he makes Pitt go up with them. And when they go up, Stan tells them that the rooms is very much on this floor, and so he suggests that they separate, and each one of them searches in a room. And indeed, they separate apart, and each one of them goes into a different room. And after a while, Pitt is surprised by his friend who turned into a vampire, who attacks him and bites him. At the same time, Joe attacks Roxy, wanting to kill her. She screams and tries to defend herself, but Stan hears her screams and runs quickly to help her. But as he goes to her, he finds that Marble's friends turned into vampires. Stan quickly goes to his grandfather's room, brings his gun, and shoots them both, killing them. At that moment, Joe is about to kill Roxy, but at the last moment, Stan intervenes and stops him. A fierce battle ensues between them, and they try to kill Joe by any means, but he is very strong and is not affected by anything. Finally, Roxy is able to cut off Joe's, miraculously kills him. A new life is written for her and Stan. After that, they both go and collect all the bodies of the vampires and put them in the cabin, and he sets them all on fire. After Stan and Roxy save the city, they get back together again and continue their lives together, and the movie ends. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all new updates. See you in the next video.